Okay, you are recording and I will now post.
Okay, Rabosai, this is the corrected diagram from yesterday. So I just want to quickly go through it. The top picture shows you of the Mizbeach. You go all the way to the top. Hold on, things are moving around. So you can see as somebody is entering the Mizbeach, going up the ramp, I can only see half of the picture from here, but the right arrow shows that if you're walking to the right side, so you're going in a counterclockwise direction, and if you're walking to the left side, then you're going in a clockwise direction. So therefore, yamin always means counterclockwise, and small means clockwise. So the Mishnah in Tamid, which is the first diagram underneath, showed that Lishkas Hatzlaim was in the northwest corner, and then it counted 3 chambers until you get to the Lishkas Alechem Hapanim. And then the Mishnah in Midos recorded that the Lishkas Hatzlaim was in the southwest corner, and it counted 1 chamber and indicated that the Lishkas Alechem Hapanim was 1 chamber over. So what the Gemara concluded was that really that was the correct location of the chamber in the southwest corner. And it's just that when you're walking in the south, it looks like the chamber of the Lishkas Hatzlaim is in the northwest corner, but really the Mishnah in Tamid would also agree that it's in the southwest corner. And therefore, this explains what Rav Huna Braid Rabbi Yeshua said, that there's no real disagreement between the Mishnah in Tamid that counts 3 chambers until you get to the Lishkas Lechem Hapanim, and the Mishnah in Midos that counts 1 chamber to get to Lishkas Lechem Hapanim, because the Mishnah in Midos, you'll see, is calculating Yamin, meaning it's calculating in a counterclockwise direction. So counterclockwise, you only count 1 chamber to get from the Lishkas Hatzlaim, which is in the southwest corner, to the Lishkas Lechem Hapanim, which is in the southeast corner. However, just go to the very bottom of the page. Go to the very bottom of the page, which shows the true location of the Lishkas Hatzlaim for purposes of the Mishnah in Tamid, which counts 3 chambers until you get to the Lishkas Lechem Hapanim. So that's going small. It's going in a clockwise direction. A clockwise direction, you have to go 3 chambers to get from the Lishkas Hatzlaim in the southwest corner to Lishkas Lechem Hapanim in the southeast corner. You go to northwest, northeast, and then to southeast. If in reality, the Lishkas Hatzlaim would have been in the northwest corner, then when you would count 3 chambers, you would end up in the southwest corner, which wouldn't be correct, because we know from the Mishnah Midos that Lishkas Lechem Hapanim was in the southeast corner. So this proves that the true direction of the Lishkas Hatzlaim was really in the southwest corner. So now we understand the reconciliation of Rav Huna Braid Rabbi Yeshua, who said, well, the Mishnah Midos is just counting Yamin, so it goes over 1 chamber, and the Mishnah in Tamid is counting small clockwise, so it goes over 3 chambers in order to get to the Lishkas Lechem Hapanim. Okay, good. Now we can start with Yudches Amud Aleph, the Mishnah for today's daf. As my 9th grade Rebbe used to say, was that clear? Was it clear? That as clear as mud? And we would say, yeah, I guess it's as clear as mud. So, go on. Okay. So Maslo Zakanim Mizikne Basin. So the Kohen Gadol was handed over Zakanim, the elders of the Bezdin, who would prepare him for the Yom Kippur service while he was in his 7 days of preparation. The Karin Lefana B'Seder Hayom, they would go over the Seder Hayom, what he would have to bring first, second, third, and so forth. And they would tell him, you should read it yourself because maybe you forgot. Oh, Shema Lo Lamata. Or maybe you didn't go to yeshiva and you never learned this in the first place. Erev Yom Kippurim Shachris, Mamidin Oso Bishar Mizrach. On the day before Yom Kippur, in the morning in Shachris, they would start him up on the eastern gate. Ma'avir Lefanov, they would pass in front of him all the different types of animals that he would have to offer as korbanos on Yom Kippur. Parim, the oxen, the elim, and the rams, basim, and the small lambs. Kadeshi makir ragil ba'avoda, so that he'll become familiar with the avoda, which animals he's supposed to slaughter when. The 7 days of preparation until you got to Erev Yom Kippur, they would let him eat and drink whatever he wanted. Erev Yom Kippur, however, as it got closer to nightfall on Erev Yom Kippur, so then they would restrict him from certain foods because they wouldn't want him to fall asleep on Yom Kippur night and possibly have a seminal emission. If he had a seminal emission to make him a Baal Keri, and then he would not only have to leave the base of Mikdash, they have to leave the entire Harabayas. A Baal Keri can't be in the Machna Levi altogether. So maybe as a shena. So he wouldn't let him eat that much because then he might fall asleep and he might have a seminal emission. So Gemara says, Bishlama Shema Shachak l'chayai. I understand people don't always remember everything that they learned, to forget is human. So I can understand maybe he forgot something. But how could you say a person gets appointed as Kohen Gadol? Is it possible that he never learned the halachos in the first place? How could you imagine such a thing? By the time doesn't the Bible say that he has to be greater than his brethren? He has to be greater than his brethren in his strength, in his beauty, in his wisdom, and in his wealth. But he has to have chachma. So there's even an opinion that says that if he didn't start out as wealthy, but we know this person is like worthy to be Kohen Gadol, so then we're supposed to make him wealthy. Tamaloma v'Kohen Hagadol me'echav says Gadol me'echav that through his brethren he's going to become Gadol. Gadoleo Ishel echav that his brethren should make him wealthy. They should give him lots of money. So Amar Rav Yosef lo kasha, he says that it's not a kasha. It's true. In the Mikdash Rishon, all the Kohanim Gedolim met the standard that they were all very wise in addition to having these other attributes. Kam Mikdash Rishon, Kam Mikdash Sheni, but everything fell apart. In the second base of Mikdash period, people just basically pay money in order to have a relative or close friend. The point is Kohen Gadol, and they weren't always so worthy. Rabbi Yassi pointed out, Tirkava the Dinri, Ailale Marta Bas Baisis Lianai Malka. Marta Bas Baisis married, she was betrothed to a man named Yehoshua ben Gamla, who was a fine fellow. The Rikpa says he wasn't so learned per se, he was a perfectly fine fellow, but she gave a half a sa'ah of gold coins in order to Yanai Melech, it's for him to be appointed as the Kohen Gadol. The Yanai Malka al Ukme Yehoshua ben Gamla, the Kohen Rabbi, in order for him to appoint Yehoshua ben Gamla, should say Aduk when Yehoshua ben Gamla the Kohen Rabbi, until he would appoint her fiance or her husband to become the Kohen Gadol. So even though it could be that had he been appointed independently, it would have been fine, but it's solely the position that she bought it for him basically, and that's what happened during the second base of Mikdash period. So you didn't have such chachamim necessarily all the time filling the position. Erev Yom Kippur Shachas Zukulei. So we said that we passed in front of the Kohen Gadol on Erev Yom Kippur all the animals that we'd have to bring, but it doesn't say Seirim. Doesn't say anything about the goats. We know that there was the seer that was sent Lazazel, there was the seer Lashem on behalf of Klal Yisrael to atone for their sins, relating to the base of Mikdash. So Satana. And so there is another Tana that has the version that yes, we would pass goats in front of him as well. So you'd be familiar with the avodah pertaining to the goats. The Tana did done my time in Latani Sirim. Why didn't our Tana mention the goats? Since the goats are brought to atone for the sins of Bnei Yisrael, so he would feel bad that there were so many sins out there that are being committed. So parnami hudiasi, but the ox of the Kohen, the bull of the Kohen Gadol, also comes to atone for sins. So how come that's okay to pass in front of him? That's not going to weaken his state of mind. So we say no. Since the par is brought to atone for his sins and for the sins of his household, the sins of his fellow Kohanim, so he knows what sins were committed by his family and by his community, by his fellow Kohanim. So he has a handle of that situation, because if he knows about a particular sin, he will have the wherewithal to approach the Kohanim in question and to inspire them to do tshuva. If there was somebody who committed a sin, made the yadle, he's going to know about it. Mahadale b'tshuva, then he'll be able to work it out that he inspires the person to do tshuva. So he figures that he has a handle of the on the situation to be able to overcome any problems. So Pekuli Yisrael lo yada. But when it comes to Seirim, the goats were meant to atone for the entirety of the Jewish people, and he has no way of knowing all the sins that would be committed by the entirety of the Jewish people. Therefore, it would weaken his state of mind. He would feel bad. So Ravina says the fact that he would know about any sin that was committed by his fellow Kohanim, so this validates a popular expression. If your nephew, if your sister's son becomes a police officer, because he so try to avoid him in the marketplace, because he's going to know all of your deep secrets, And if you didn't pay any of your taxes, he'll know that to go after you. He doesn't need an $800 million stimulus package, to be allocated to the IRS to know to come after you. He'll know anyway because he's a family member. So avoid family members who are tax collectors. So so the entire 7 days, they did not withhold any food from the Kohen Gadol until Erev Yom Kippur. So Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda ben Nakusa So Rabbi Yehuda ben Nakusa said that they would give him an Erev Yom Kippur. They would give him fine flowers and eggs because that would loosen his bowels. And that way, like before a person goes for colonoscopy, so, you don't want to get everything out of the system. And this way, he wouldn't have to go to the bathroom on Yom Kippur. He wouldn't be distracted during his service. Everything, would get out of his system. So Amalo Koshik and so he said, no, the problem with that is that it's going to cause him to get very warm inside of his body, and that could lead to a seminal emission, and that's even worse. We certainly don't want that, because then he would be disqualified from doing the service altogether. Tanya Sumkos Amar Mishum Abi Meir, Sumkos said in the name of Meir, lo Abi, lo Ababi. These are acronyms. Don't give him the foods that fall into the acronym Abi, and some say don't give him the foods that fall into the acronym Ababi. And some saying also don't give him white wine. White wine also is going to have this untoward effect in terms of his potentially coming to Tuma. So lo Abi, don't give him the Abi, which is low esrog. Don't give him an esrog fruit or esrog jam. Below Beitzim, don't give him eggs. Lo yayin yoshin, not aged wine. Lo abavi, and some say don't give him abavi. They add something. Lo esrog, lo Beitzim, lo basa shamen. And also don't give him fatty meat. Fatty meat is also something to refrain from. Having the Suda before Yom Kippur, you don't want to be roa carry. Stay away from basa shamen. Lo yayin yoshin, and also aged wine. The Yesham Aflo Yain Lovin, and here, of course, we have the other opinion as well, saying, and also white wine, not good, especially whatever the white wine was like in those days. So Shayain Lovin, maybe it's Adam Lidei Tuma, because the white wine, the way it was made then, would lead somebody to Tuma, to possible seminal emissions. On the subject of seminal emissions, Tana Rabban and Rabbi Stuart Zab, a man has, a discharge, like a gonorrhea type of the discharge that looks like the white of a spoiled egg, as opposed to the emission of a balkari, which is just like the white of a regular egg. So Zab Tonlo b'macho v'chomine macho. So Azab, we generally say that he only becomes Azab if he has 2 such emissions. Then he already has to count 7 clean days. 3 emissions, he also has to bring a korban. But it's only if the emissions come in a normal fashion, but they don't come from like an onus. So we say, if the person ate a lot, then we say maybe that's what caused the emission, and therefore we're just going to treat it like regular shikva zera. It's not going to lead to his becoming a azab. Elazar ben Pinchas Omer Mishmar Yehuda ben Beseira, that when we are in the process of checking azab, we stay away from certain types of food that would lead him to have emissions that we consider to be ordinary emissions that might actually cause him to be tummy. What would those foods be? We don't give him the foods that fall into the acronym of Chagbi and the foods that come into the acronym of Gavas. What are those foods? So we're going to see exactly what those foods are. Low quadrama mebin tuma, and we don't give him other foods as well. They would lead him to become tamei through a tumazab. Lo Chagbi, we don't give him the Chagbi. That would be lo cholov, not milk, lo bino, not cheese, below beitza, not eggs, lo yayin, and not wine. Below. And the wine, according to the emendations over here, is the specific wine of yain yashin, not aged wine. Below gavam, and we don't give him gavam, which is make recent shapul, crushed bean soup, ubasa shamein, or fatty meat, u marias, which is a type of fish brine. Local drama revealing tuma, and we don't give him other types of food that can lead to tumah. Lasuyim, what does that come to include? That last catch-all phrase, lasuyim ha. This includes the following additional items that we wouldn't give to somebody who's being checked as to whether he's becoming a zab, because we don't. If he eats these foods, he's more likely to become a zab. The the 5 things that lead a person to tumah ve'elohein: hashum, garlic. We don't give him garlic. V'ashiklayim, cress. V'chalagugos, which is a food which is called purslane. V'abeitzim, and not eggs. V'agagir, we don't give him arugula. So there's a pasuk in Malachim that deals with Elisha when there was like a famine in the land and he wanted to make some broth and he sent out, one of his talmidim to get like certain food for the broth. So one of the talmidim of Elisha went to Elisha to the field, the locate oros in order to collect oros. What are the oros? So Tana Mishmei, the Rabbi Meir said Gargir. This is arugula. And Rabbi Yochanan, Lama Nikra Shiman oros. Why is arugula called oros? The lights. Shemiros is enayim because they illuminate the eyes. So Amar Abuna. Gargir Yachal Achlo Ochlo. So the gargir that has this salutary effect. So if you can eat it, eat it. And if you can't eat it, so at least pass it over your eyes. And that also will have some sort of a beneficial effect. So Amar Papa Begagira Mitzrana. So our Papa says this isn't answering a kasha or anything. It's just kind of giving you, good medical advice. This is only talking about arugula that grows like on the boundary of the field where it's not contaminated. There's no cross contamination of other herbs and the like, so therefore it is pristine, and that's when it has its most beneficial effects. On the subject of Kerry, so we have some good advice for guests. Guests shouldn't make themselves embarrassed by having Kerry seminal emissions that come out on the bed sheets of their host. So Amar Gidul Amarab. So it's a minhag when people, I guess, a couple is a guest in someone's house, they're supposed to bring their own bed sheets. So Amar Gidul Amarab Aksenai Lo Yochol Beitzim. A guest is not supposed to eat eggs because eggs could lead to a seminal emission. Lishim and Taliso Shabal Bayis, also bad idea to sleep in the sheet of the Baal Bayis because then the Baal Bayis, the host, might find something on it that would be embarrassing. So again, similarly on that subject, so we speak about what can a person do in order to avoid having this type of an emotional reaction in their body that would lead them to a nocturnal emission. So Rav Kimikla did Darashish, when he would go to the town of Darashish, which was right outside Babel, Machri is Manhavya Liyoma. So he would say he wants to be my wife for one day, so that he would have the satisfaction knowing that there's a wife available, and that's like a pas pasalo. We'll see that it gives him the comfort of knowing that there is somebody he could go to, legitimately. So therefore, he's less likely to have a nocturnal emission out of frustration. So Nachman Kamikla Shekansib. Similarly, when Nachman would go to the town of Shekansib, which was located in Babel, Machri is Manhavya Liyoma. He would also say, who wants to be designated as my wife for the day. So we say, wait a second, how could they just designate at the last minute somebody to be a wife when a woman, has a marriage proposal? So we assume that she has, a certain amount of excitement. It's called chimud, and that leads to a certain type of dam to come out, even if she's an old woman or a very young girl who hasn't, yet had any kind of a beset. We still say that there's something about chimud that causes some dam to come out. And you need a 7-day period for her to purify herself and go to the mikvah before she can be with her husband. And engagement in the halacha has to always be at least 7 days. So we're going to get to that. That's a later kasha. But first we have another kasha. So we have a kasha from the following brisa that you shouldn't marry a woman in one country and then marry a woman in another country. It's a bad idea to have multiple families in different countries, not recommended. Don't marry a woman in this country, have another woman family in another country. People do it, but it's a bad idea. Shema, Yizdavgoz, it's a bad idea for all kinds of reasons, but the Gemara gives, this specific reason now. Shema Yizdavgoz, because they're not going to know about each other. You're going to have a son with one wife in a different country, and you'll have a daughter with a wife in this country, and then that son and daughter are not going to know that they're brother and sister, and they may end up marrying each other. It's going to be incest, bad. So it's a bad result. And then the whole world is going to be filled up with mamzerim. Very bad. That the world will be filled with promiscuity. So don't do that. So that's not such a problem, because if somebody would be the son of a big Rav like Rav, or like Rav Nachman, so they're going to boast about it. They're going to say, son of Rav, son of a daughter of Rav Nachman. So they're going to know that this one is the sister, is the half-sister, this one is the half-brother. So therefore, word will get out. So that problem we've solved. But what about the other problem that I identified? Tabu Alina say that if you approach a woman, make a marriage proposal, and she agrees, she says, yes, I will. She has to sit 7 clean days, because we assume that there was some discharge of blood of dam chimun. So we say, do you have a modi lahu mikedim? That have a modi lahu, the chachamim would inform them ahead of time. So there would be a 7-day period in which they would have known that the rabbis are coming to visit. They would send the shliach to approach the woman to make the marriage proposal, so that the woman would have a 7-day period afterwards in order to cleanse herself, so that she would be available when the rabbi would embark upon his trip to be married to him. Or the alternative explanation is that this wasn't for the purpose of bia. This was for the purpose of just the woman being set aside as a companion, as somebody who would be his wife. So therefore, he would have a comfort level to know that he would be able to be with her, but he wouldn't actually be with her. Because you can't compare somebody who has bread in the basket to somebody who doesn't have bread in the basket. So therefore, since it was only for the purpose of a yichud, they would not have a discharge of a dam for getting married for that limited purpose. So now the Mishnah says, Masu Ziknei Bezdin Ziknei Kahuna, that the Ziknei Bezdin, who had been educating and preparing the Kohen Gadol during this period of time, now give over the Kohen Gadol to the supervision of the Ziknei Kahuna, the elders of the Kohanim. And they would bring the Kohen Gadol up to the Aliyas, Beis Avtinas, to the attic where the Beis Avtinas, who were the makers of the Ketores, could be, so the Kohen Gadol could be taught the Avodah Kasher Shem Mikdash, the most difficult Avodah, which was how to use both of his hands and to tip the container of the Ketores, so that to do the chafina, so that they would fill up the two palms of his hand without any of the Ketores going outside of the hand. So it was a difficult procedure, very difficult procedure, and it required the careful tutelage of the experts who were from the Beis Avtinas, and then they would have the Kohen Gadol take a shvuah b'niftaru, and they would take leave of the Kohen Gadol, and they went their separate ways. And they said to the Kohen Gadol as follows: they said, Ishi Kohen Gadol, listen to us, you fellow, the Kohen Gadol here. We are the agents, the messengers of the Bezdin, and you are our emissary to do the avodah on Yom Kippurim, the Beis Mikdash. The Shliach Bezdin, and Ata Shluchenu Shliach Bezdin, and you are, our agents, and therefore an extension of being a Shliach Bezdin. Mashpina anu alecha, so therefore we are imposing this oath upon you, in the name of He who resides in this house, namely HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that you better not alter anything in terms of the avodah you're supposed to do, because the Tzidukim would do the Ketores in an unusual way that we'll see. That they didn't have the smoke begin to rise in the Kodesh HaKadoshim itself because of their own interpretations of the Psukim, and they worried about Kohen Gedolim, since they had certain individuals who weren't so suitable. After all, they paid for the position, who might be Tzidukim, closet Tzidukim, or otherwise. So you better not alter the service in any way. From that which we have instructed you. So he would go away and he would cry that it was necessary for them to make such a statement. And they would go away to court and they would cry because everybody felt bad that it was even necessary to give this warning, that they had to worry about such a thing. So it's such a bizayon, they have to worry that the holiest man in the entire community of Israel should have to even be suspected of such a thing. If he was a chacham, so then what would he do in sort of like the evening as he's getting ready for the Yom Kippur service? He would be dorish, so that he would learn Torah on his own. But otherwise, they would have the different Talmidei Chachamim. They send some, rebbeim from the yeshiva to go and to, teach him Torah on their own. And if he had the ability to just kind of, read, at least read passages in Tanakh, so then he would do that. And he couldn't do that, so they would read in front of him. What would they read? What type of sections of Tanakh would they read? They would read entertaining sections that would be able to capture his attention, because the one thing that we didn't want on the night before Yom Kippur, we didn't want him to fall asleep because we didn't want him to have a nocturnal emission. So you have to read like interesting parts of Tanakh. This is kind of interesting in its own right. Which parts of Tanakh are considered to be interesting that, in the middle of the night, it would engage somebody's attention, they wouldn't fall asleep. But Marco in the Panam, the Eov is, very, very stirring to listen to the great oratorial, speeches of Eov's colleagues and so forth, and to contemplate the meaning of suffering in this world. Uve Ezra, and they would read from the stories of Ezra, the Jews, came back to the second Beis Hamikdash period. Uve Divrei Hayamim, and also Divrei Hayamim, which tells you kind of like, the history and the story of Bnei Yisrael. So it would be interesting. Zechariah ben Kavutel Omer, Zechariah ben Kavutel said, and he said, many times I would read in front of the Kohen Gadol in the Sefer of Daniel, because Daniel also is a very, interesting Sefer with all kinds of interesting nebuahs and like. You have to be able to translate from the Aramaic, obviously. I guess they understood the Aramaic. Okay, that brings us to the end of the Mishnah. The Gemara is already Yud Testament up. Yes, Hashem, I hope to see you in person tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Have a safe day, Rabbi.
Thank you.